One August night transformed into the stage for one of the most precise operations of modern espionage warfare in the Middle East. While the world slept, in the heart of Sanaa, the capital of Yemen, an explosion cut through the silence of the Arab dawn, definitively altering the regional balance of power. The target was not just any building or a conventional military installation. It was a man whose decisions echoed from the Yemeni mountains to the corridors of power in Tehran, passing through crisis cabinets in Tel Aviv and Washington. Muhammad Abd al-Karim al-Gamari, a central figure in the military hierarchy of the Houthi rebels, had become much more than a local commander. His influence extended through a complex network of operations that threatened the stability of an entire region already devastated by decades of conflict. The operations he coordinated were not limited to Yemeni borders. His tentacles reached merchant ships in the Red Sea, oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, and more recently, Israeli territory through ballistic missiles and suicide drones with alarming precision. Al-Gamari's elimination represents a fascinating chapter in the long tradition of Israeli covert operations, a direct continuity of tactics developed during the most intense years of the Cold War, when national survival depended on the ability to neutralize threats before they materialized. Since the early days of Unit 269, and later the famous Sayeret Matkal, Israel has perfected the art of invisible warfare, transforming selective elimination into a foreign policy tool as refined as it is lethal. The context that made al-Gamari a priority target was not born overnight. It had been developing for over a decade, ever since the Houthis emerged from the northern mountains of Yemen, to challenge not only the central government in Sanaa, but the entire regional security architecture built after the Camp David Accords. The rise of the Houthis coincided with the period of greatest Iranian influence in the post-Saddam Hussein Middle East, when Tehran sought to consolidate its growing power through proxy groups spread across the Fertile Crescent. Al-Gamari personified this Iranian strategy of power projection. He was not simply a tribal commander, transformed into a military leader. He was the product of years of Iranian investment in training specialized cadres, a project that included advanced training in Lebanon alongside Hezbollah and specialization courses at the military academies of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. When he returned to Yemen, he brought with him not only tactical knowledge but a strategic vision that would definitively transform the operational capacity of the Houthis. Al-Gamari's trajectory perfectly illustrates how modern proxy networks function in the Middle East. Born in the mountains of the Hajjah province, a region where central authority never fully established itself, he grew up in an environment where tribal loyalty prevailed over any concept of a national state. This initial background would be crucial to his later ability to mobilize combatants from different clans under a common banner, something few commanders can achieve in the fragmented Yemeni tribal scenario. The Hussein Badreddin al-Houthi Institute, where al-Gamari completed his ideological training in 2003, represents much more than a simple educational institution. It is the indoctrination center of the Houthi movement, where young men from the Zaidi tribes are transformed into revolutionary cadres capable of challenging regional powers. The education received there combines elements of traditionally moderate Zaidi Shiite theology with revolutionary concepts imported from post-1979 Iran, creating a powerful and extremely mobilizing ideological synthesis. Al-Gamari's true transformation into a regional threat occurred between 2005 and 2009, during his training periods in Lebanon and Iran. In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, under the direct supervision of Hezbollah, he learned urban warfare tactics that had been tested against Israeli forces during the 1982 invasion and subsequently refined during the years of occupation of southern Lebanon. These techniques ranged from the sophisticated use of improvised explosive devices to infiltration operations into enemy territory, as well as the coordination of simultaneous attacks on multiple targets. At the facilities of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Al-Gamari gained access to an even more advanced level of military training. There he learned the asymmetric warfare methods developed during the Iran-Iraq War, learned to operate medium-range missile systems, and, crucially, was initiated into techniques for coordinating operations through encrypted communication networks. This knowledge would be fundamental years later, when he needed to coordinate simultaneous attacks against multiple Saudi and Emirati targets. Al-Ghamari's return to Yemen marked the beginning of a new phase in the operational capability of the Houthis. Until then, the movement had been limited to relatively conventional guerrilla operations, taking advantage of the tribe's traditional knowledge of the mountainous terrain to harass government forces. With Al-Ghamari, the Houthis began to demonstrate capabilities that surprised regional and international military analysts. Armed drones began to appear flying over Saudi positions, ballistic missiles were fired at Riyadh, and coordinated operations evidenced a level of planning and execution completely incompatible with a traditional tribal militia. Al-Ghamari's meteoric rise within the Houthi hierarchy cannot be dissociated from the broader regional context. Yemen had become the perfect laboratory for testing military doctrines developed over decades of conflict in the Middle East. On one side, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates applied modern aerial warfare concepts using cutting-edge Western technology. On the other, Iran tested its theories of proxy warfare through an increasingly sophisticated irregular army, capable of challenging numerically far superior conventional forces. The surgical precision with which Al-Ghamari was eliminated in Sanaa represents the culmination of months, possibly years, of intelligence operations. Unit 8200, the Israeli equivalent of the American NSA, had for decades developed a communications interception capability that rivals any global espionage agency. Its operations during the Cold War included everything from intercepting Soviet communications to monitoring Syrian troop movements in the Golan Heights, always keeping Israel a few steps ahead of its adversaries in terms of knowledge of enemy intentions. The process that led to Al-Ghamari's exact location combined traditional human espionage methods with the most advanced electronic surveillance technologies. Israeli agents, likely operating through third parties to maintain deniability, had managed to infiltrate Houthi communication networks, something extremely complex considering the group had learned the importance of operational security from Hezbollah. The breach of these encrypted communications represents a triumph of Israeli cryptanalysis, demonstrating capabilities that place the Mossad among the most technologically advanced espionage agencies in the world. The choice of timing and method for Al-Ghamari's elimination was not accidental. Israel needed to send a clear message not only to the Houthis, but mainly to their Iranian sponsors. The operation needed to demonstrate that no distance was great enough to protect those who threatened Israeli security, establishing a precedent that would echo far beyond Yemeni borders. At the same time, the operation had to be executed in a way that minimized the possibilities of regional escalation, maintaining a level of deniability that allowed both sides to retreat from a direct confrontation. Al-Ghamari's location in Sanaa presented considerable technical challenges. The Yemeni capital, controlled by the Houthis since 2014, had been transformed into an urban fortress where any foreign presence would be immediately detected. The streets are constantly patrolled by local militiamen who know every face, every vehicle, every suspicious movement. Infiltrating Israeli operatives into such an environment would be practically impossible, which explains the option for a long-distance attack using precision technology. The second segment of this narrative reveals how Al-Ghamari's elimination fits into a broader tradition of Israeli operations in the Middle East, connecting directly with the lessons learned during the Cold War confrontations. Since Operation Wrath of God, launched after the Munich massacre in 1972, Israel has developed a response doctrine that transcends national borders, establishing the principle that threats to Israeli security will be neutralized regardless of where they originate or take refuge. This doctrine, forged during the most intense years of the Cold War, when national survival depended on the ability to anticipate and neutralize threats, has become an integral part of Israeli security strategy. Al-Ghamari's elimination cannot be understood in isolation from the broader context of the proxy war that has been developing in the Middle East since the collapse of Iraq in 2003. The power vacuum created by Saddam Hussein's fall allowed Iran to dramatically expand its regional influence, establishing an arc of allies and proxies extending from Afghanistan to the Mediterranean. The Houthis represent the westernmost point of this Iranian strategy, controlling territory that includes some of the world's most important shipping straits, particularly the southern entrance to the Red Sea through the Bab al-Mandab Strait. Al-Gamari had become the main architect of this maritime denial strategy. Under his coordination, the Houthis developed the capacity to simultaneously threaten international commercial traffic and Saudi oil facilities, two of the region's main economic vulnerabilities. This capacity did not emerge from a vacuum. It represented years of Iranian investment in technology transfer, specialized training, and crucially, the development of a logistical chain capable of sustaining complex military operations in territory distant from Iranian bases. The supply network that supported Al-Gamari's operations perfectly illustrates the sophistication of modern proxy operations. Electronic components arrived in Yemen through seemingly legitimate trade routes, transiting through Dubai, Oman, and other regional re-export centers. Once in Yemeni territory, these components were assembled in underground facilities, creating missiles and drones that, although technologically simple compared to Western systems, had sufficient capacity to cause significant damage to critical infrastructure. The knowledge Al-Gamari had acquired about electronic warfare during his training periods proved crucial to the development of these capabilities. The navigation systems of the Houthi drones demonstrated surprising sophistication, managing to evade Saudi and Emirati defense systems on multiple occasions. This precision suggested access to guidance technologies that are normally only available to well-equipped conventional military forces, evidencing the level of Iranian technology transfer to its Yemeni proxies. The Israeli response to this growing threat followed patterns established over decades of operations against Iranian proxies. The first step always involves extensive intelligence operations, mapping command and control networks, identifying key leaders, and understanding the target group's decision-making mechanisms. In the case of the Houthis, this task was particularly complex due to the tribal nature of the organization, where personal loyalties often outweigh formal hierarchies. Unit 8200 likely spent years intercepting Houthi communications, gradually building a detailed map of how the group operated internally. This mapping work included not only the identification of leaders, but also the understanding of how decisions were made, how orders were transmitted, and, crucially, how Al-Gamari communicated with his Iranian superiors. The breach of these communication networks represents one of the most complex electronic intelligence operations ever executed in the region. Al-Gamari's psychological profile, developed by Israeli analysts, revealed a man whose background combined ideological fanaticism with exceptional tactical pragmatism. Unlike many proxy commanders who are primarily motivated by local or tribal considerations, Al-Gamari had developed a regional strategic vision, understanding his role within the broader geopolitical competition between Iran and the Western Saudi-Israeli bloc. This strategic understanding made him both more dangerous and more predictable, as his actions followed logics that could be anticipated by experienced analysts. The technical preparation for Al-Gamari's elimination involved technologies developed over decades of confrontation with terrorist groups and conventional military forces. Israel had perfected during the Second Intifada the use of precision missiles for selective eliminations in densely populated urban environments, a capability subsequently refined during operations in Gaza and Lebanon. The technology needed to hit a specific target, more than 2,000 kilometers away, represents a natural evolution of these capabilities, adapted for the context of modern regional warfare. The choice of timing for the operation reflected considerations that transcend the Yemeni theater. Israel needed to balance the necessity of neutralizing a growing threat with the risk of provoking regional escalation that could directly involve Iran. Al-Gamari's elimination occurred at a moment when regional tensions were high, but had not yet reached the point of making a direct military confrontation between Israel and Iran inevitable. This timing suggests a level of coordination with regional and international allies that is characteristic of the most complex Israeli operations. The execution of the operation demonstrated capabilities that surprised even observers familiar with Israeli military competence. The precision of the attack, which managed to specifically eliminate Al-Gamari without causing significant civilian casualties in a dense urban area, evidences the level of real-time intelligence available to Israeli operators. This capacity for discrimination is crucial for maintaining the international legitimacy of such operations, avoiding the type of diplomatic reaction that could compromise future similar actions. The Iranian reaction to al-Ghamari's elimination was carefully calibrated to demonstrate displeasure without precipitating uncontrolled escalation. Tehran understands that a disproportionate response could justify even broader Israeli actions, potentially including direct attacks against Iranian facilities. This dynamic of controlled escalation is characteristic of modern proxy warfare, where both sides seek to maximize pressure on the adversary without crossing thresholds that would make an open war inevitable. Al-Ghamari had become a symbol of the Iranian capacity to project power through proxies, and his elimination represented a significant setback for this strategy. More than the loss of a competent commander, his death demonstrated the inherent vulnerabilities in relying on individual figures in organizations that, despite their growing sophistication, still depend heavily on charismatic leadership to maintain cohesion and operational effectiveness. The third segment of this analysis examines the broader ramifications of al-Ghamari's elimination for the regional balance of power, connecting this specific event with the long-term trends that shaped the post-Cold War Middle East. The death of the Houthi commander was not simply the elimination of a tactical threat, but rather a move in a complex geopolitical chess game where each action generates multiple reactions, creating waves that propagate far beyond the immediate scenario of the Yemeni conflict. The capacity demonstrated by Israel to eliminate al-Ghamari in Sanaa sent clear messages to multiple regional audiences. For the Lebanese Hezbollah, the operation served as a reminder of the vulnerabilities that even the most sophisticated proxy groups face when confronted with Israeli surveillance and attack technology. Hezbollah had invested considerable effort in training al-Ghamari and other Houthi commanders, transferring knowledge acquired during decades of confrontation with Israel. The apparent ease with which Israel managed to locate and eliminate al-Ghamari raises worrying questions about the operational security of all Iranian proxies in the region. For the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, al-Ghamari's elimination represented a significant failure of their doctrines for protecting strategic assets. For years, Iran had invested in creating multiple layers of protection for its most valuable proxy leaders, including secure communication protocols, regular location changes, and early warning systems to detect imminent threats. The fact that these measures proved insufficient to protect al-Ghamari suggests that Israel had managed to penetrate Iranian security networks much more deeply than previously known. The technical sophistication required to track and eliminate al-Ghamari demonstrates how the revolution in surveillance technology has fundamentally transformed the nature of modern warfare. During the Cold War, selective elimination operations depended primarily on human agents capable of physically approaching the targets. Al-Ghamari's elimination was executed through a combination of electronic intelligence, satellite surveillance, and long-range precision weapons, representing a qualitative evolution in military power projection capabilities. This technological evolution has profound implications for the structure of regional deterrence. Traditionally, groups like the Houthis could rely on the protection offered by geographical distance and the logistical complexity of executing operations in adversary-controlled territory. Al-Ghamari's elimination demonstrates that this traditional geographical protection has lost much of its relevance in the face of modern surveillance and attack capabilities, forcing a complete re-evaluation of how proxy groups can protect themselves from external threats. The regional reaction to al-Ghamari's elimination revealed the complex political calculations that govern alliances in the contemporary Middle East. Saudi Arabia, while publicly condemning the violation of Yemeni sovereignty, privately celebrated the elimination of an adversary who had coordinated hundreds of attacks against Saudi territory. This dichotomy between public positions and private reactions is characteristic of regional diplomacy, where considerations of domestic legitimacy often conflict with practical strategic interests. The United Arab Emirates, which had been regular targets of attacks coordinated by al-Ghamari, responded to his elimination by discreetly increasing intelligence coordination with Israel recognizing the effectiveness of Israeli capabilities against shared threats. This convergence of interests between Israel and the Gulf states represents one of the most significant geopolitical transformations in the region in recent decades, creating an anti-Iranian alignment that transcends traditional Arab-Israeli divisions. Al-Gamari's elimination also highlighted the limitations of international responses to modern proxy warfare operations. The UN Security Council, paralyzed by cross-vetoes between permanent powers with conflicting interests in the region, proved incapable of articulating any meaningful response to the Israeli operation. This institutional paralysis reflects the inadequacy of the international governance structures created after the Second World War to deal with the complexities of modern warfare, where state and non-state actors operate in gray zones that defy traditional legal categorization. The Houthi response to al-Gamari's death followed patterns established by other proxy groups after the elimination of key leaders. Initially, there was a period of ritualistic mourning, with al-Gamari being elevated to the status of a martyr whose sacrifice would inspire future generations of combatants. This narrative of martyrdom serves multiple organizational functions, helping to maintain morale within the group while simultaneously justifying future operations as revenge for the death of a fallen hero. Operationally, the Houthis responded by intensifying attacks against Saudi and international targets, demonstrating that al-Gamari's elimination had not significantly degraded their capabilities in the short term. This organizational resilience reflects the distributed nature of modern command structures in proxy groups, where knowledge and authority are shared among multiple commanders to reduce vulnerability to targeted eliminations. The Iranian response was characterized by calculated restraint, recognizing that a disproportionate escalation could invite further Israeli action against Iranian assets in the region. Instead of direct retaliation, Iran focused on accelerating the process of replacing al-Gamari with new commanders trained in even more sophisticated tactics, demonstrating the cyclical nature of modern proxy warfare, where each elimination simply triggers the development of new threats, potentially more dangerous than those that were eliminated. This dynamic of action-reaction creates an environment of permanent instability, where tactical successes rarely translate into durable strategic advantages. Al-Gamari's elimination represented a tactical victory for Israel, but it did not fundamentally alter the regional balance of power, nor significantly reduce the Iranian capacity to project power through proxy groups. Instead, the operation simply forced Iran to adapt its tactics, potentially leading to the development of more secure and effective methods to protect future commanders. The fourth segment of this analysis delves deeper into how al-Gamari's elimination connects with historical patterns of conflict resolution and escalation in the Middle East, particularly during the Cold War period, when both superpowers used proxy conflicts to advance their strategic objectives without risking direct confrontation. Al-Gamari's elimination echoes many of the tactics utilized during that period, adapted for the contemporary context of regional power competition between Iran and the Israeli-Saudi Western alignment. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union developed sophisticated doctrines for managing proxy conflicts that maximized pressure on adversaries while maintaining plausible deniability and avoiding escalation to direct military confrontation. Israel's approach to eliminating al-Gamari demonstrates similar sophistication, utilizing advanced technology to achieve precise targeting while maintaining sufficient ambiguity about methods and authorship to allow all parties a path toward de-escalation if necessary. The precision with which the operation was executed reflects decades of experience that Israel gained combating proxy groups during the Cold War period. From confronting PLO operatives in Lebanon during the 1970s, through dealing with Iranian-backed groups during the 1980s and beyond, Israel developed a comprehensive understanding of how proxy organizations operate, how they communicate, and where their vulnerabilities can be exploited. This knowledge base provided the foundation for the sophisticated operation that resulted in al-Gamari's elimination. The technological capabilities demonstrated in the al-Gamari elimination represent a natural evolution of methods first developed during the Cold War for gathering intelligence and executing precision strikes. The satellite surveillance, electronic intercepts, and guided munitions used in the operation all trace their origins to technologies developed during the superpower confrontation, subsequently adapted and refined for the specific challenges of Middle Eastern proxy warfare. The strategic calculation behind Al-Gamari's elimination also reflects lessons learned during decades of proxy conflict management. Israel understands that eliminating individual leaders, while tactically satisfying, rarely resolves underlying conflicts without addressing the broader structural factors that give rise to such conflicts. However, targeted eliminations serve important functions within broader strategic frameworks, degrading adversary capabilities, disrupting command structures, and sending deterrent messages to other potential threats. The international community's response to the Al-Gamari elimination reveals how global governance structures have adapted to dealing with modern proxy warfare. During the Cold War, both superpowers could rely on bilateral communication channels and established protocols for managing escalation risks. In the contemporary Middle East, the absence of dominant global powers combined with the proliferation of multiple regional actors creates a much more complex environment where escalation risks are harder to predict and control. The role of international law in governing targeted eliminations, like the Al-Gamari operation, remains deeply contested. While some legal scholars argue that such operations violate sovereignty principles enshrined in the UN Charter, others contend that the right to self-defense justifies preemptive action against imminent threats, regardless of geographical boundaries. This legal ambiguity provides space for operations like the Al-Gamari elimination to occur without clear international consequences, but it also contributes to the erosion of international norms governing the use of force. Al-Gamari's elimination demonstrates how modern technology has fundamentally altered the cost-benefit calculations surrounding targeted killings. During the Cold War, such operations required extensive human networks, complex logistics, and significant risks to operational security. Contemporary operations can be executed using primarily technological assets, reducing human risks while increasing precision and plausible deniability. This technological evolution has profound implications for the future of proxy warfare in the region. As surveillance and targeting capabilities continue to improve, the ability of groups like the Houthis to protect their leadership through traditional means becomes increasingly limited. This creates incentives for such groups to adapt their organizational structures, potentially moving toward more distributed command systems that are less vulnerable to targeted eliminations but may also be less effective operationally. The broader regional implications of the Al-Gamari elimination extend beyond immediate tactical considerations to encompass fundamental questions about the future structure of power relationships in the Middle East. The operation demonstrates Israel's capacity to project power across vast distances, potentially altering adversary calculations about safe havens and operational security. This demonstration of capability may deter some potential threats, while simultaneously encouraging others to develop countermeasures or alternative strategies. The Iranian strategic response to the elimination of Al-Gamari will likely focus on developing more resilient command structures for its proxy forces, while simultaneously seeking to develop capabilities that can impose costs on Israel for such operations. This action-reaction dynamic is characteristic of proxy conflicts, where each tactical innovation triggers counter-innovations that gradually escalate the sophistication and destructiveness of the overall conflict. The long-term trajectory of conflict in the region appears to be moving toward increased sophistication in both offensive capabilities and defensive countermeasures, creating an arms-race dynamic that may prove difficult to control or resolve through traditional diplomatic means. Al-Gamari's elimination represents just one move in this broader competition, significant in itself, but unlikely to prove decisive in determining the ultimate outcome of regional power struggles. Understanding Al-Gamari's elimination within this broader historical context reveals both the continuities and innovations that characterize contemporary Middle Eastern warfare. While the basic logic of proxy conflict remains consistent with Cold War patterns, the technological capabilities available to all sides have evolved dramatically, creating new possibilities for both effective action and catastrophic escalation that require careful management by all involved parties. The fifth component of this investigation examines the specific tradecraft and methodologies employed in the Al-Ghamari elimination, analyzing how contemporary espionage techniques blend traditional human intelligence gathering with cutting-edge technological surveillance to achieve objectives that would have been impossible during earlier periods of Middle Eastern conflict. The complexity of executing precise targeting operations across international boundaries requires a level of intelligence integration that represents the pinnacle of modern intelligence craft. The process of identifying and tracking Al-Ghamari likely began years before his eventual elimination, involving a painstaking reconstruction of his network, habits, communication patterns, and security protocols. This type of long-term intelligence development reflects methodologies first refined during the Cold War, when intelligence agencies learned that successful operations against high-value targets require sustained observation over extended periods rather than short-term tactical intelligence gathering. Contemporary signals intelligence capabilities allowed Israeli intelligence to monitor Houthi communications with a granularity that would have been impossible during earlier conflicts. Advanced cryptographic analysis, combined with sophisticated pattern recognition algorithms, enabled the identification of communication signatures specifically associated with Al-Ghamari's operations, gradually building a detailed picture of his role within the broader Houthi command structure. The integration of signals intelligence with human sources required careful coordination among multiple Israeli intelligence agencies, each contributing specialized capabilities to the overall operation. This type of interagency cooperation reflects organizational learning that occurred during decades of complex operations, where failures often resulted from inadequate coordination between different intelligence specialties rather than insufficient information gathering by individual agencies. Satellite surveillance capabilities employed in tracking Al-Ghamari represent a quantum leap beyond anything available during the Cold War period. Modern imaging satellites can provide real-time tracking of individual targets within urban environments, combined with electronic signatures that allow precise identification even when targets attempt to avoid visual detection. This technological capability fundamentally alters the balance between offensive intelligence operations and defensive security measures. The precision strike capability demonstrated in the Al-Ghamari elimination required not only accurate targeting information, but also sophisticated understanding of the weapon systems needed to achieve desired effects while minimizing collateral damage. This requirement reflects both technological advancement and evolving international norms regarding civilian casualties in targeted elimination operations. The choice of timing for the elimination reflected careful analysis of multiple factors, including Al-Ghamari's operational schedule, political conditions within Yemen, regional tensions, and international diplomatic considerations. Professional intelligence operations require balancing multiple competing considerations to identify optimal windows for action, a skill that develops only through extensive experience with similar operations. The post-operation analysis phase of the elimination would have included a comprehensive assessment of the operation's effectiveness, lessons learned for future operations, and an evaluation of potential consequences that might require follow-up action. This systematic approach to operational learning reflects professional standards developed through decades of experience with complex intelligence operations. Modern counterintelligence challenges facing groups like the Houthis include not only protecting against traditional human intelligence penetration, but also securing electronic communications against sophisticated signals intelligence capabilities. The failure to protect Al-Ghamari demonstrates the difficulty of maintaining operational security against adversaries with access to advanced surveillance technologies. The broader implications of technological advancement in intelligence operations extend beyond individual eliminations to encompass fundamental changes in how non-state actors must organize themselves to survive in hostile environments. Traditional security measures that relied on geographical remoteness or political sanctuary are becoming less effective against adversaries with global surveillance capabilities. The evolution of counterintelligence doctrine among Iranian proxy groups likely includes increased emphasis on compartmentalization, communication security, and operational unpredictability to reduce vulnerability to targeted elimination operations. However, these measures often come at the cost of operational effectiveness, creating trade-offs that must be carefully managed by organizations operating under constant threat. The demonstration of Israeli capability in the Al-Ghamari elimination serves important deterrent functions for other potential threats, but it also provides valuable intelligence for adversaries seeking to understand Israeli capabilities and develop countermeasures. This intelligence value means that while such operations may achieve tactical objectives, they also contribute to adversary learning that may reduce the effectiveness of future operations. The strategic communication aspects of the elimination include not only the immediate message sent through a successful operation, but also the longer-term reputation effects that influence adversary decision-making. Professional intelligence organizations understand that the psychological impact of successful operations often exceeds their immediate tactical value, influencing adversary behavior in ways that multiply the effectiveness of limited resources. The final segment of this comprehensive analysis addresses the long-term implications of the Al-Ghamari elimination for regional stability, international law, and the evolution of modern warfare. The operation represents more than a tactical success. It exemplifies how technological advancement is reshaping fundamental assumptions about sovereignty, deterrence, and conflict resolution in the contemporary international system. Al-Ghamari's elimination occurs within a broader context of erosion in the traditional concepts of state sovereignty, particularly regarding the responsibility of states to control activities occurring within their borders. Yemen's inability to prevent foreign military operations in its capital highlights how weak states become venues for proxy conflicts that they cannot control, creating dangerous precedents for international order. The technological capabilities demonstrated in the elimination suggest that traditional concepts of safe havens for non-state actors are becoming obsolete. During the Cold War, geographical distance and political sanctuary provided meaningful protection for proxy groups. Contemporary surveillance and strike capabilities render such protections increasingly ineffective, fundamentally altering strategic calculations for both proxy groups and their state sponsors. This technological evolution creates new forms of strategic instability in regions characterized by proxy conflicts. When all sides possess advanced surveillance and strike capabilities, the tendency toward preemptive action increases as decision-makers feel pressure to act before their own capabilities are degraded by adversary action. This dynamic can accelerate conflict escalation in ways that are difficult to control through traditional diplomatic mechanisms. The normalization of targeted elimination operations as policy tools raises profound questions about international law and conflict governance. While individual operations like the Al-Ghamari elimination may be justifiable under specific circumstances, the broader pattern of such operations contributes to the erosion of legal norms that traditionally regulated interstate conflict. The strategic environment in the Middle East appears to be evolving toward permanent low-level conflict management, rather than traditional concepts of peace through negotiated settlements. In this environment, periodic targeted eliminations become routine tools for managing adversary capabilities, rather than extraordinary measures reserved for extreme circumstances. The implications for smaller states caught between regional powers are particularly troubling. Countries like Yemen become venues for conflicts that they cannot control, suffering devastating consequences while remaining largely powerless to influence the conduct of operations in their territory. This dynamic threatens to spread instability across additional weak states throughout the region. The broader international community faces difficult choices in responding to trends exemplified by the Al-Ghamari elimination. Traditional diplomatic tools appear inadequate for managing conflicts that operate largely below thresholds that would trigger conventional international responses. Yet the cumulative effect of such operations may prove more destabilizing than traditional warfare. Future developments in surveillance and strike technologies will likely accelerate trends evident in the Al-Ghamari elimination, creating environments where targeted elimination operations become even more precise and difficult to defend against. This technological trajectory suggests that current conflicts represent only the early stages of a broader transformation in how political violence is organized and conducted. The strategic responses available to adversaries may include the development of more resilient organizational structures, enhanced counter-surveillance capabilities, or escalation to forms of conflict that cannot be addressed through targeted elimination operations. Each of these responses carries risks of further destabilizing regional and international security environments. Understanding the elimination of Mohammed Abdelkarim al-Gamari requires recognizing both its specific tactical significance and its role as an indicator of broader transformations in how conflict is conducted in the contemporary world. While the operation achieved the immediate objectives of removing a specific threat, its longer-term implications for regional stability and international order remain uncertain and potentially troubling. The challenge for policymakers, scholars, and practitioners of international relations is developing new frameworks for understanding and managing conflicts that operate according to logics that differ fundamentally from those that governed previous eras of international conflict. The al-Gamari elimination provides a window into this emerging reality, offering insights that are both tactically fascinating and strategically sobering.